Well, hello everyone, and welcome into another episode of the Payne and Drain Show. I'm your host Zach Payne. With me, as always, is my co-host Alex Drain. Following a very normal NFL game. Alex, how are we doing today?
Pretty good. Got a lot to talk about today. One of the weirder NFL games of all time, but no shortage of topics today.
We're in a historic stretch of weird NFL games for the Lions right now. Before we get into the show, just want to thank everyone for the support we've been getting on the last couple of episodes, especially. We've crossed over 1,000 streams on Spotify, over 2,000 streams on Apple, and the most recent YouTube video got over 300 views, and we gained like 12 subscribers off of that. I know we got a shout out on the
The MGO board.
MGO,
Yep.
yeah, which thank you so much for that. But all the support we've been getting just truly baffling to us because we had no expectations with this show, and it's been doing a lot better than we thought. So thank you all for that. Now, to start with, Alex, as always, we jump into the offense first. And this was a tale of 3 quarters of absolutely useless play before they finally wrote the ship. But it all comes back to Jared Goff having a very out of the most out of character game we've seen from him with 5 interceptions. What happened?
I don't know if you can really pinpoint it necessarily. First of all, what was going on with his hand? Like the ball was slipping out of his hand. He had at least 3 or 4 throws that he just threw into the ground that seemed to
Mm-hmm.
come out wrong. He had that throw to JMO that JMO catches despite hard contact that's just a duck and it's wobbling in the air. So something was going on with his hand, first of all, and his accuracy was way off compared to what it normally is, which is odd because they were playing mostly in an indoor environment. They had the roof open, but it's not the same as a true outdoor because you have
Mm-hmm.
still a lot of roof there despite the top being open. So there isn't really an obvious weather reason, but you look at some of those interceptions, he wasn't making a ton of bad reads. He's just missing balls. The deep ball interceptions were just not where they needed to be. The one intended for Laporta just was like way too high and wide. It was a very strange game from his accuracy standpoint.
Yeah, and it's weird because the way the ball was coming out was almost reminiscent of a rain game, but we
Yeah.
saw when he was in the rain last week against the Packers, he was totally fine accuracy wise. So I don't know what happened on that front. And yeah, just some of the reads, the deep balls to JMO that were not open at all, and he was just chucking them. Like I know you had put out a tweet. It's like, look, if Jameson Williams is open, great. That's a great idea to throw it deep to him, but he's not a jump ball guy. You're not going to, for as much as he can make contested catches over the middle, as we saw in this game, he's not going to be the guy that goes up and dunks on 3 people. Like, I don't know what the expectation was there.
Yeah, that's the concern, I think, with the JMO deep ball that we haven't seen rear its head a whole lot, but it is a thing because, think back to Calvin Johnson or any of your other like famous deep ball guys. The Calvin Johnson Stafford connection, a big part of it was just, he's down there somewhere, like he'll go get it, right? And even if he doesn't, you generally expected him to be able to at least force a PBU, right? Play DB essentially if it's going to be intercepted. And we just haven't seen JMO do that necessarily. He's not huge from a height standpoint. He's not a big, thick guy. He is mostly a speed guy, and so if you hit him in stride, it's a touchdown. But he's not gonna bail you out necessarily if you miss the throw in a big way. And in this case, his first interception to JMO, he's open. It's just underthrown. Or actually, no, that's not the interception. That was the dropped
Yeah, it was,
interception
yeah.
earlier. Yeah, my mistake there. So he almost threw 6 interceptions, but that one stood out because it's just underthrown, and then the other one he just misses, the one that was caught. And that's just kind of the unfortunate downside to throwing those routes is that you have less margin for error there. And he was off in this game, and it did come back to bite him.
Yeah, and I wonder if those 2 weeks that JMO took had was suspended maybe impacted things because it looked like they were just rusty, like the connection there. It looked like Goff just wasn't able to account for the speed as much as he had earlier in the season. We and JMO himself obviously had the one catch early in the game where it was the easiest catch of his life, and he drops it, but then catches it again, and that like that connection was just a little iffy in this game. But on the whole, yeah, very weird. Which is it's funny that Goff had such a bad game because he actually had some lasers in there too. Like the first touchdown to Laporta was probably the best on the run throw he has made as a Lion. Like it was spectacular. Rolling out to his right, just lofts it perfectly. It was a very Jekyll and Hyde type game. Maybe part of that is due to the offensive line being awful for 3 quarters. Penei Sewell gets beat for the second week in a row. This one was a lot cleaner than the case of him tripping over Kevin Zeitler. Dan Skipper starting at left tackle. Graham had another doozy of a game. With that, what were your thoughts on the O line for the first 3 quarters?
It wasn't very good. The Sewell getting beat at right tackle leads to the second like tip drill interception.
Yeah.
I actually did think that is partially on Goff, and the reason is because he sees the guy there. So it's not a blindside hit. He sees the rusher coming around the right side, and we know he sees him because he ducks out of the way. He ducks out of the way, and then he decides to wind up and throw, even though he hasn't totally shaken the defender. And so he ducks out of the way, then winds up, and boom, the guy's right there and just bats it out of his hand. I mean, in that case, I think you got to step up a little more to give yourself more room, or just tuck it, take the sack. It just was a little forced in that situation, but it's pretty unusual to see Sewell get beat like that. That said, I didn't have many negatives for him. I think I had 2 negative events when I did the rewatch for Sewell, whereas Skipper came out a lot worse on rewatch than it was live. Pretty bad from a pass pro standpoint. I'll give him credit. The David Montgomery touchdown run, he had a great block on. He had a couple nice run blocks, but it's kind of what we've come to expect with Skipper. Like it's going to be an issue facing the athletic guys, the guys that can really dip the shoulder. He just doesn't really have bend, and he's very tall and stiff, and it is an issue. Glasgow had some bad moments. There was a stunt that came up the middle that they couldn't pick up at all. Zeitler a little iffy as well, but Ragnow and Sewell were definitely the two best. No surprise there. The other guys, pretty up and down. Oh, and for the first large chunk of the game, it was pretty down, and that was the big story.
Yeah, and Taylor Decker to be determined if he will play on Sunday. Well, we'll just have to monitor practice reports. We're recording on Tuesday, so we haven't seen any of the practice reports as of now, but we do know Dan Campbell was a little optimistic. Going back to the second intercept where Sewell gets beat, that was very reminiscent to me of it was 2021. It was the second Viking, like Dan Campbell's first win. There's probably 5 minutes left in the game. The Lions were holding a lead, and they go for it on 4th and 1 from on their own side of the field, and they call a play action, kind of a rollout. And Goff, the same thing. He tucks it past the guy, and then he goes to throw, but he doesn't realize that he only beat the guy by a yard, and the guy was able to recover, forces a fumble. Vikings went down, scored. Then the Lions had to go lead their game-winning drive. It seems to be a bit of a thing that Goff maybe overestimates how fast someone's coming off the edge, where he thinks if he just ducks, they're going to blow by him. I don't know. It doesn't. It's not like Sewell gets beat often, so it's hopefully not something we really ever have to worry about. Now, the rest of the offense in general was really sputtering its tires, especially the run game. They found their legs in the fourth quarter, but this was for the first 3 quarters, at least the first half, they were averaging like 1.8 a carry. I don't even know what was happening there. Like on the rewatch, did you see anything aside from the Texans just playing the run really well?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, honestly, is that from the Texans, they deserve a lot of credit. I thought their linebackers and some of the DBs, the nickel and safeties to some degree, they were just really good. They were really fast. They were off the ball extremely well, like the snap, boom, firing downhill. And it was most apparent in those situations where the Lions were not able to get the gains on the ground they're so used to getting. And like there's a clip I have, or a screenshot I took of, it's like a 2nd and 9, and the Lions come out and they got 6-on-6 in the box. And it's like the Lions in this situation under this regime are just so used to coming up to the line in that situation and knowing we're going to get 5 or 6 on this play. Like that is the meat of the offense. The belief that they can run in passing downs against later boxes and be able to get into manageable third downs and things of that nature. They do it on third and medium a lot and to set up fourth and short, which they tried in this game on a 3rd and 7 at midfield that got nothing. And they were just not able to get anything on those. And the biggest factor when I looked at it is just like the linebacker reads were so good. They were so aggressive, knew exactly where to be. And so there's one run in particular where I'm looking at this and they have the numbers set up. They're asking Brock Wright and Laporta on one play to come in and block the second level. And if they hit their blocks, this is going to be 15 plus yards. And the guys they're supposed to block have read it so well and have gotten a perfect jump on the snap that they just beat them to the spot. And those guys just tear right by them before the blockers can get there. And that was the story. Like runs to like the pitches and tosses where it's more naked and you don't have blockers, but you're just relying on scheming it up, worked pretty well. They had a couple of those to Gibbs. But runs of that nature where you're asking Zeitler or Glasgow and a tackle to run out into space and tackle and block a guy to give the running back space just wasn't working because those guys were just beating them to the spot. Houston was faster, they were more aggressive, and it was really impressive. And I thought their defensive front had a nice performance as well. It seemed like a really angry, motivated group in the Lions. Maybe were just a little off guard early on in the game, a little taken aback by it. And you gotta give Houston credit. They made it really hard on the Lions, and there were a few guys in particular. There was that Al-Shahir guy, I believe is his name, Aziz Al-Shahir, the linebacker. There was Petrie, the nickel. They both had really good games, and sometimes that just happens. And I think they'll learn some things as when they look at the tape this week.
Yeah, Petrie in particular, he was also the one who, on the first interception on that first drive, just crashes on the edge and jumps up, makes a great deflection. He was flying around all game. Al Shahir, I think this was his first game back from injury, from IR. So clearly his absence was felt. And Houston's a good team, even without Will Anderson. They are a good team. They're a well coached team. D'Amico Ryan's very good coach. So you have to give them credit. Although for the Lions, maybe like I know coming into this game as a fan, I viewed this as like a side quest. Like this was not a game that was the Lions were desperate to win. They were going to walk out of Houston as the number 1 seed in the NFC, regardless of what happened. And maybe it was just the Lions were feeling really good about themselves and thought, hey, we're gonna win. Maybe a little overconfidence, and they reeled it in. Obviously, especially the defense, which we'll talk about later.
Well,
Now those.
I do think that also just with Houston, we talked about this last week. Their performance against the Jets was bad.
Yeah.
Like they were coming off a really poor game, and the Lions were coming off a really good emotional high against the Packers. They were huge for the division, and I think perhaps early in the game that mismatch it was a bit of a factor, at least in the early going. And one other thing I want to note about the Houston's aggressiveness, I thought. And we'll probably get into Ben Johnson and stuff later, but I thought they needed to do more play action to take advantage of the aggressiveness. And they also needed to throw more slip screens, honestly. They threw a couple of them, and both went for 15, 20 plus yards. And I would have just kept doing it over and over until those linebackers and safeties are backing off a bit on your run game.
I think the Dallas game last year. Do you remember? Like the Lions scored 19 points in that game, and it was largely because of how aggressive Dallas was against the run.
Yeah.
There was like 6 times where Gibbs got blown up in the backfield just because Dallas was playing the run, and they said, "Hey, we're just going to send 7 guys to kind of a run blitz." Aggressive defenses are somewhat of a counter to the Lions, just because the Lions are so not even obsessed. They're so reliant on staying on schedule that if you can stop that first down run, get them into 2nd and 10, the odds that they get the first down is a lot lower as comparative to the rest of the NFL. The Lions are a lot worse when they're behind schedule than other NFL teams. It works out in their favor because they're so good at maintaining that schedule and getting 4 yards on the first down or getting 5 yards on the second down to make it third manageable. But the aggressive nature of Houston definitely was a thorn in their side. Now, First three quarters, very bad. Very bad. Fourth quarter, what changed to allow the Lions to mount that comeback offensively?
Well, they started getting a bit more of an accurate Jared Goff, but the biggest thing was they were starting to be able to run it a little more. It seemed like they may have worn the Houston front down a little bit. Maybe the Texans got a little tired from how aggressively they were playing through the first three quarters, but they also just had some better ideas. I thought as the game went along, they were able to, uh, they got the JMO catch on that duck while he gets just clobbered from both sides. Sandwich was was a nice play. That moved him forward. The Amon Ra screen touchdown was a really neat idea. They started to vary up the run concepts a little more. They were running outside. And honestly, another big thing that I noticed in the fourth quarter there, they were struggling early in the game with wide receiver blocking on some of their runs. And then a couple of those Gibbs runs to the perimeter late in the game, suddenly you were getting much, much better blocks from Amon-Ra and as well as Tim Patrick, who were struggling early on. So they just sort of, I think, a different parts of the offense just started to find their game a little bit. And they were able to get a few good plays, get a few smarter play calls, adjust a little bit. Houston's a little more tired. You're wearing them down a little bit. And they were able to scratch out what was ultimately needed to win the game. That said, it's not like they suddenly flipped the switch and were driving up and down the field against Houston that fourth quarter. I mean, they scored one touchdown, and then they kicked two 50-plus yard field goals. So it wasn't like they scored four touchdowns in the fourth quarter. So it was pretty marginal changes, but it was just enough to get them across the finish line.
Yeah, I know on the Amon-Ra touchdown, it was Tim Patrick's lead block there that really sprung it before Sewell absolutely clobbered the guy. The other thing is, I think the outside runs, they were just running behind Sewell a lot more. I think they kind of stopped with the nonsense and said, look, let's get the ball behind our best player in the hands of our most explosive player, and that's how Gibbs, I think he had 3 plays of 15+ yards off that right side where it's just get Sewell in front and run behind him, see what happens. And it worked out. We'll talk about Jake Bates later because he obviously is the hero of the day. How about, do you have any last thoughts on the offense before we turn over to the defense?
Yeah, a few things to talk about. Just on the Sewell note, these are the games where you kind of separate the men from the boys, so to speak, and you watch the guy like Glasgow, like Zeitler, etc. But this is the game where your truly star players really stand out. And you come back from this game, you watch the other OL guys, and it's just like, yeah, Ragnow and Sewell in particular are just really good. Like, now, to go back to your prediction, I don't remember what show that was early in the year, but like the Penei Sewell will be a Hall of Famer thing. Like, this is the sort of game where you come back and you're just like, this guy is really, really good. And so that's one thing to note there. Outside of that, I thought Montgomery had a couple nice runs I liked. He had that one where he spins out of a tackle and picks up 5 yards. He may have missed a cut on the 2-point conversion. Not entirely sure, but that's something to note. They get an interestingly, not generous necessarily, but it was right on the borderline spot on that 3rd and 1 on, I think it's the touchdown drive in the fourth quarter where Montgomery's really close to the sticks. I'm not sure he actually got it, but they gave it to him, and so we moved on. But something to note there. They took one delay of game earlier in the game. Not sure if it was a crowd factor or whatever. They were just kind of out of sorts early. And lastly, for Ben Johnson talk, but he had too many drives in the second quarter, starting with a run. I think they had 3 or 4 consecutive drives that begin with a run play. That got a little predictable. That said, I did love that one screen they threw, I think in the third quarter, on I think it was a 3rd and long, this like arcing loop screen to the right side with Sewell out in front that Gibbs gets like 30 yards on. That was beautiful. Wasn't Ben Johnson's best game, but he cooked on that one.
Yeah, and we will have to talk about in the game theory segment the end of the first half.
Yeah.
But a lot of the too much predictability on first downs in particular in this game. So flipping over to the defense, the run defense is back. I don't think there's any way around that. The run defense, Josh Pascal is the key to the run defense, evidently, because Joe Mixon he had 25 carries for, I think, 48 yards, averaging 1.8 a pop. That was spectacular. From start to finish, that was spectacular.
Yeah, they were dominant. There was basically nothing. I don't know what was, what Mixon's longest run in this game was.
I think it was the 8-yard touchdown. He had the 44-yard screen on the first drive,
Yeah.
where the Lions call blitz. It was just a great screen call. But aside from that, I think his longest rush was 8 yards, and it was on that first drive touchdown.
Yeah, and that was like the slip screen. That was just a great play call. Give them credit on that one. They got the Lions there. They got the Lions on the screen right into the blitz. Is what it is. On things that were not schematic, the Lions just dominated the Texans, and this was a somewhat advantageous matchup in the sense that the Texans' interior offensive line isn't great. Lions are pretty healthy at their defensive tackle spot right now with Reeder and McNeil and Onwuzurike and everybody else ready to go. So it was a favorable matchup from that. Getting Josh Pascal back was huge. I thought on rewatch, I thought Pascal had a really good game, and especially coming off that Packers game where we talked about last week that the Lions' issues at edge, mainly that they were starting multiple practice squad players, was hurting them on those perimeter runs where they're losing their edge. Getting Pascal back was really big. And to the credit of Muhammad, who was still playing in this game, he blows up a Tank Dell end around that ends up going for like -5 yards. He's the one that stops it, and it's not really that he did anything great. It's just no one blocked him. That he dips under. I think it's Stroud, and there's one other guy coming at him, and they're supposed to hit that block. And if they do, it's probably a big game. But he runs right by them. He gets way into the backfield, and they stop that one. So give him credit there. And then otherwise, I thought Reeder was good. McNeil had a monster game, took advantage of the favorable matchups. He obviously has a sack in the pass rushing part too, but the linebacking play looked good. And then something I've talked about a lot, most people will focus on the 2 interceptions here, but Carlton Davis had a couple great run stops. I've loved him in run defense all year. Branch in run defense. It was just everybody chipping in. It was a cohesive unit, and they were just dominant from start to finish.
Yeah, and that Tank Dell play, that was the weirdest double end around I've seen because he was so deep in the backfield that I thought he was going to pass it. I was like, oh, he's 11 yards back. He's about to throw it because there's like 5 Lions in the backfield. I'm like, oh no, the Lions just snuffed it out. And I wonder if part of it is the Lions have to practice against Ben Johnson every week. I do not think there's anything an NFL team can throw at them that Ben Johnson has not already done to them in practice. So maybe that they're always on their toes because they do pretty good against trick plays in general. The run defense spectacular, the edge play, Pascal very good. This might have been Aleem McNeil's best game since the Giants game in 2022. That where he had 10 pressures in that game. He was everywhere on Sunday. He was everywhere. And do we know what happened to him on that sack where he was like holding his ear or his jaw?
I don't know. I never saw anything about it. That was very strange.
Yeah, because he's like coming to the sideline and he's holding his head. I'm like, oh, he's concussed. He's gonna get like the spotters are gonna take him out of the game, and then he's just like holding his ears. Like, did he burst an eardrum, getting a sack?
It was strange. It might have been like a jaw thing too. I don't know exactly. He was like pointing to the side. That was definitely weird. I will throw out there on the McNeil lore. He was really good in that Raiders game last year too. The Monday night game, he had a couple sacks in that one. So. Just putting that out there. But it was a great game from everybody in run defense, and it really set the tone. It put the Texans in a lot of 3rd and long situations, and sometimes they converted, unfortunately, like on that first drive, but a number of them they didn't, and it was a huge part in how they were able to stay in this game. Also, one other thing here, DJ Reeder draws a really consequential in hindsight holding penalty. The Texans on that screen get down to the 3-yard line. I think
Yep.
it's 7-0 at that point. They're on the cusp of going up 2 touchdowns. He draws the holding call. It backs Houston up, and they're not able to score a touchdown. They kick a field goal. Really, really
Yeah.
consequential play that I think kind of gotten forgotten. It was forgotten by me, honestly, until I did the rewatch, and I was like, wow,
Mhm.
that was big.
Yeah, because the highlight of that red zone stop is James Houston dropping into coverage and then rushing and getting a sack, his first of the year. But yeah, that penalty ends up being a big deal. There was also another consequential penalty the Texans got later in the game, which was ironically an illegal use of hands to the face. It was, and I was just amazed that yeah, I don't know if it was Hunter or someone else, but they managed to get their hands so high on Dan Skipper. That dude's 7 feet tall. How are you getting your hands on his face mask in general? But yeah, the other thing with the defense is CJ Stroud in the first half was playing at a very high level. He was the only reason the Texans were moving down the field as the run game was useless. And that kind of went away in the second half. Part of that is the Lions defense, obviously, but I'm wondering. I don't know what happened with Stroud particularly, but that first half I tweeted out was probably the highest level of quarterback play that the Lions had played thus far. Because I mean, maybe Stafford. You could argue Stafford in week one. Maybe Gino in week four. Aside from that, like CJ was on one. The touchdown to Mechie at the end
Yeah.
of the half, where it's just a perfect throw, a great catch. Terrion is his arm is in between Mechie's hands and his face mask. He's just like he's there. He's right there, and it's a perfectly executed play by the Texans. The but a few plays in this game where Stroud, especially in the first half, where he's just looks so calm in the pocket, unfazed by pressure. He just steps up to avoid McNeil, sets his feet, and throws a dart over the middle. And the Lions, they recovered in the second half. And maybe it's as simple as that first play where Carlton Davis gets the interception, just rattles him a little bit because number one rule of throwing out routes, you cannot throw them late and you cannot throw them behind. And he did both, and it got picked. I don't know. What were your thoughts on Stroud specifically?
Yeah, Stroud, that final drive of the second quarter going into halftime, that was the best he did all game, as good as we have seen this season from any quarterback. He hits a tight end on an out route against Jack Campbell, and it's a tiny window. I mean, Campbell is right there, and he just drops it in, and then that touchdown throw, as you mentioned, Terrion gets beat on the release ever so slightly. He's like a half step behind. There's a small window there. Stroud hits it dead on. And then Arnold still manages to get his hand right up in the grill, and Mechie holds on. I mean, not a lot you can say there. This is what I am somewhat accustomed to with Stroud, generally speaking. I mean, I remember scouting him in college multiple years, and he was probably the most accurate college quarterback I've ever scouted. Just dead on gunslinger. He can hit, a pinpoint mark from very far away, and we saw that at points in the first half. There were definitely snaps where they just didn't bother him enough, didn't sort of move him around. Was still somewhat the case in the second half. It was this kind of tough contradiction in this game because if you rush four, you're probably not getting home. He's going to have time to laser snipe you. On the other hand, when they blitzed, they weren't getting home. Some of those blitzes, especially in the first half, were really poor. And so you go to that first drive of the game where they allowed the Texans to convert a 3rd and 10 and a 3rd and 16. 3rd and 10, they send a 6-man blitz. Doesn't get home in the slightest. Robertson is beaten by Dell, and it's a first down. And so they didn't really have the best pass rushing day, so to speak, and that gave Stroud opportunities in the first half. But then second half, they start to get a little better with their coverages. They get a little more pressure. McNeil has his sack. O'Connor has a sack that they missed live, but then recorrect and say his knee was down. So they started to get a little more pressure, a little better coverage, and it did just kind of knock Stroud off his rhythm a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and Brian Branch also had another great day. Carlton had a good day, obviously with the two picks. The second one to where Stroud just throws a layup for like I don't so I think it's Ted Nguyen from The Athletic did a film breakdown on Twitter of this play where the Lions are in their single high man coverage and it looks like the Texans are running a simple crossing route and then a post route on the other side. And instead, what it is it's a crossing route which draws Kirby down from his single high. Carlton's rotating up top because that's what usually single high man coverages do. Is the far corner will take the safety's role and the safety will crash down on the corner. The opposite corner will sink down to cover the post. But Tank Dell ends up running a corner route and it's wide open because it's a perfect play design, perfect play call. It's executed perfectly, and CJ just instead of leading Tank Dell to the corner of the end zone, he sets his feet and just lobs up a duck. And Carlton, just with pure hustle, is able to recover and intercept it. I mean, credit to Carlton for not giving up on the play. Credit to 10 out of 11 Texans players for executing that play very well. That's just CJ, a young quarterback, making a mistake. And the Lions took advantage.
Yeah, and Davis on that play, to his credit, it's kind of like a center fielder closing on a fly ball to the gap and, like reaching out and extending to make the play. It was a well done play, but obviously it should be a touchdown if Stroud hits it. But, this is how it goes in quarterbacking. Sometimes guys are going to miss a few throws, and Stroud happened to miss a couple highly consequential ones, and it's the same story we've seen from the Lions defense. We've talked about this for a few weeks now with the yardage versus the EPA and all that stuff, but as long as the Lions continue to make 1 to 2 game-changing plays each week, then their EPA is going to continue to look pretty darn good. And we don't want to be relying on turnovers necessarily. I don't think they completely are, but it does majorly help their metrics. But as long as they keep doing it, it's going to keep being a factor. And we've seen this now in so many of these big games. Like you think back to the Vikings game where Branch has that beautiful interception baiting Darnold. Or you think about the Packers game with Kirby's pick six. And now in this one, you have 2 takeaways. Like against the better marquee opponents on the schedule, even going back to the Rams game in week 1 where Joseph has the interception in the end zone. Like they just keep doing it. They keep finding ways each week to make really important plays that change the trajectory of the game. And it's why they keep winning.
I think this was the first game all season where one of Brian Branch or Kirby Joseph did not have an interception. Um, I have to go back and look, but
This was the first cornerback interception, right?
Yep, and the Lions have interceptions in every single game this season. So at the very least, the defense and the secondary is opportunistic. Are they the best in the world? No, they can get beat. They're a lot better than they were last year, but they're just taking anytime an opponent makes a mistake, they're taking advantage. Like you have Kirby Joseph, who is arguably the best ball hawk in the league right now with how good he's been playing. Brian Branch, who is one of the better all-around defensive players in the league right now, might be an all-pro, might even work his way into defensive player of the year consideration. We'll see. And then you have Terron Arnold and Carlton Davis, who they aren't superstars, but we've talked about this before. They are starting caliber corners in this league, which makes all the difference in the world. And it's forcing teams to make more mistakes against them, which in turn is causing more turnovers. The Lions, they might be they're top 3 in turnover margin so far. They might, I think it's them and the Bills at the top. Like they and the Ravens probably, because Lamar only has like 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
But it's they've been playing great. Great bend, don't break, take advantage of your opponent's mistakes. It's very simple, like fundamentally, but it's been very effective for the Lions this season. One note is Jack Campbell. I thought had another really good game. He obviously got beat on the tight window throw to Schultz, but I'm noticing Campbell is like fully ascended beyond Alex Anzalone at this point, especially in coverage. I did not think that we'd be talking Jack Campbell in year 2 being a better coverage linebacker than Alex Anzalone, but I think we're there.
Yeah, Anzalone did get beat in this game on, I think it was a 30-yard catch. I think it was Dalton Schultz was a tight end, I know, and he just gets beat pretty clean. They also had a zone bust over the middle to Tank Dell that I don't know who exactly it's on, but Anzalone was the closest to it. Those are sort of tough to tell sometimes, but
Hmm.
Campbell looked good to me. Otherwise, although Anzalone did have a nice tackle on a
Yeah.
throw to the flat, so put that one out there. But Campbell was pretty solid in this game. And I do want to mention on the topic of the safeties, I didn't really have any Kirby Joseph notes in this
No.
game. He was rarely seen, which for deep safety is fine. And Brian Branch, we kind of gloss over it a little bit, but this is another. He didn't have an interception, but this is just another virtuosic Brian Branch game. Like you go back, you watch the rewatch, and it's just like this guy is so good, so
Hmm.
so good. He has a sequence in this game where, in the span of I think 3 plays, he has one just beautiful textbook PBU. Then a couple plays later, he has a screen that he totally blows up, stops dead in the tracks. I mean, the tackling on the perimeter was so good. He has multiple PBUs. Like it's just every time the guy pops up, he's making plays. He's the best player on the Lions defense, and there's still a lot of good players in this defense, but he amazingly he might be the most underrated like player on the Lions. It just in the sense that I still think that people don't comprehend how good he is and where he probably should rank in the scope of NFL defensive players, because we mostly talk about edge rushers, occasionally corners. That's who tends to be the DPOY stuff, right? Like it's usually Micah Parsons or Myles Garrett or whatever, right? Watt, etc. Or on the off year, it's a Darrell Revis or Richard Sherman or Sauce Gardner, or etc. Safeties just don't seem to get the love that they used to back when we had Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu and guys like that. But Brian Branch is playing as well as any defensive player in the NFL, and he just every single game is a force, and that was the case again here today.
It's so funny because the first PBU came the where he's just crashing down on Tank Dell and dives over his back to swat the ball comes like 2 plays after Terrion got dinged for
Yeah.
the defensive pass interference, which it was yet again another case of it's good coverage. He's just there a half beat too early, and then 2 plays later Brian Branch gets one. It's like, yes, that's how you do it. Learn from that, Terrion, please. I thought Terrion, oh yeah, he's fine. He's a fine corner. He's a fine CP2. He might be a lower end CB2 as of now, but he was probably playing at like a CB3 level to start the year, so you'll take it.
Well,
Uh,
and as we talked about last week, he's given a tough assignment. He continues to play mostly man coverage on an island, and he's still figuring it out up and down. The underthrown DPI is just kind of like it
Best
is
play
what
in
it is.
football.
We best play in football. And the second one that he doesn't get flagged at the end of the game, the final defensive snap where the Texans are all riled up about that. On rewatch, what's frustrating to me about that play is the receiver stops early.
Yeah, tell
And
Xavier Hutchinson to not stop from a full sprint in the middle of the field.
well, the ball isn't there. The ball is he stops like right on the left hash, and the ball is thrown on the right hash.
Hmm.
And just looking at it, I'm not sure he's going to catch that ball even if there isn't contact, because he seems to misjudge it. And my thing with that is it's a crossing route, so Arnold has the ability to watch the football. And I don't really know in that situation what you're supposed to do on that play. You're trailing the receiver by a half step. You're watching the ball. You have an approximation of where he's going to have to run to catch it, and you're getting ready to potentially PBU it. Then he just stops like multiple steps before where the ball is going to be. Like, and it's a tough one because it's right on that borderline for me in terms of what I like with DPIs, where on one hand he does hit him early, blah blah blah, prevents him from making the catch. On the other hand, as I always say, and this was our DK Metcalf conversation, wide receivers need to play their position and play their position well and actually attempt to catch the ball. And like when you stop up before the ball is there, I don't know, man. Do your job. Like go make an attempt to catch the ball correctly, and then maybe we can throw the flag if you get him interfered with. And so it's just a tough call. It's just a weird play. And also you have Anzalone like in front. He could have intercepted it. Just a odd one all around. If they throw the flag, I wouldn't have been outraged. I also see the world where they don't. I don't know. Is what it is. The Lions have earned eternal credit with referees that we can cash in for the rest of time whenever we get a call that goes in our favor.
I honestly I start to think that good teams just sometimes like people just like complaining about good teams winning and finding excuses because I saw last week in irony of ironies a Packers fan complaining that the Lions won the game because of the officials. And oh, how far we've come. How far we've come. And in this, I don't know, that call in particular, I think you can't reward the receiver there. I don't see a world where you reward that receiver for because throwing a defensive pass interference implies the receiver did his job and was going to catch the ball, and the defensive player interfered with his ability to do that illegally. Nothing Terrion Arnold did stopped Xavier Hutchinson from making a play on the ball. Everything, like the reason that's incomplete is because Hutchinson stopped. So, unless you want to turn the NFL into every wide receiver becomes Joel Embiid, like DK Metcalf, like you can't throw that flag. And I fully agree with that decision not to. And if the Lions had been on the other, like if it had happened, if let's say Jamison Williams is running across the ground and he stops and he goes flying and oh, where's the flag? Sure, people in Detroit might have been outraged, but personally, I would have stood by it and said, look, you can't call that because that sets a terrible precedent if it is called. So, is what it is. Now, moving on to special teams. Once again, we've had this talk a few times, but Jake Bates. Any fears or anxieties that we had going into the season completely out the window. Jake Bates has unironically been one of the better kickers in the entire league, and the clutch gene that is the reason he's here. That came through in this game. A 58-yarder with about 5 minutes to play barely squeaks inside of the upright, and then a 52-yard game winner barely squeaks in on the other side. I think his kicks kissed both uprights. I don't know how he managed to do that twice on each side, but yeah, Jake Bates, phenomenal.
Have you ever seen that before?
I don't think so.
Coming close to grazing both uprights. I don't think I had seen that. Both of those are great kicks because they weren't ones that are like going wide and they draw in. They just are like straight straddling both uprights both times. You're watching, you're just like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, woo! It's just such a fun feeling. I saw this stat that he is the only kicker in the NFL with at least 10 makes that has made all of them from field goal on field goals this year. Obviously, he's missed extra points, but 14 of 14 now on the year, which we really wouldn't have guessed that to start the season. So credit to him. It went a while before he was kicking any 50-yarders, but he came up big in this game. He's earned a lot of trust with the team. 3 of 3 now from 50 on the year, and he's 32 of 33 on extra points. No complaints from me right now, and he's the hero back in Texas. Unfortunately, I kind of think that the Jake Bates brick salesman is going to be our new Matthew Stafford, Clayton Kershaw, same high school. Like it feels like we're going to hear that one for at least a couple more years in almost every single game broadcast.
Yeah, which is it's a great story the first time you hear it, but yeah, it's gonna get old pretty quick. But coming into the year, the thing with Bates is we said there is a better than whatever percent chance that we lose a game because Jake Bates misses a crucial field goal. The Lions have now won 2 games directly because of Jake Bates, at least 2 games.
Yep.
So it maybe we are due for a bad missed field goal at a big time, but for now, I'm just gonna enjoy the fact that we have a kicker that has been perfect on his field goals because that's something that we were very anxious about, and he's 3 for 3 on 50+ yarders. I saw there's an old quote from Dave Phipp that was surfacing on why the Lions didn't run on 3rd down before the kick, and it was because sometimes he's better from further away. Which is very backwards, but I don't know.
It is what it is. On special team stuff, besides Bates, I will throw out there that we probably had the worst Fox punt of the year in the first quarter of this game. It's short and it's a line drive and it
Yeah.
allows a pretty good return from Houston. Out of character, but whatever. And also we have a Ben Neiman block in the back that nullified a good punt return from Raymond. So it wasn't their best special teams game of all time, but it was made up for in a very massive way by Jake Bates. So
Yeah.
we'll take it.
To be fair, the block in the back from Neiman is the reason why that return
Yes.
kind of took off. So, I mean, it justified call. And Jack Fox, I mean, when's the last time you saw Jack Fox? Like, we see him outkick the coverage sometimes. When's the last time he outkicked the coverage and it was a 40-yard punt? When's the last time an NFL punter did? And also on the other side,
Yeah.
Townsend had a phenomenal game for the Texans.
Yeah.
Like he had numerous booming punts that like Jack Fox like punts where they're 60 yards and they hang in the air for a long time so the coverage can get there. So like I don't know, the coverage in general was fine. Is what it is. Like sometimes you're not gonna have the best special teams day. Lions still have a pretty good special teams, and Jake Bates overcame any special teams issues that the Lions may have had in this one.
Yeah, when you have, I think, the number one DVOA special teams unit, you can take a couple of less than ideal things happening, especially when you make up for it with a 58-yard field goal. So, is what it is. Game theory stuff, I don't have a whole lot in this outside of the some sort of decisions at the end of games, but at the end of the game in particular. But they did not go on fourth down in this game. There weren't really any opportunities for a fourth down decision. I guess you can argue about that, like 4th and 6 at midfield after the run got stuffed, but
No.
I was fine punting there. So was not the most controversial game from a management standpoint.
My problem with the 4th and 6 from midfield is you run 3 times and pick up 4 yards. If your first 2 runs on 1st and 2nd and long don't do anything, why are you still running on 3rd and 7? I understand that they do that, but not 3. You don't run 3 times in a row. If you had thrown it on 2nd down and it was 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 after an incompletion, okay, yeah, throw or run it. But you just ran the ball twice and they got stuffed both times. Nothing is going to change. Like, gotta mix it up. You can't be that predictable.
Yeah, which is more of a Ben Johnson thing. On the end of the game stuff, you mentioned the FIP quote. How do you feel about the management there at the end?
I would have run the ball and tried to get an extra 1 or 2 yards because, when you're at that end of the game, every yard will just make it a little bit easier. You never know, right? And obviously that kick went in by millimeters. So, or sorry, inches. I forgot you Americans don't. Y'all don't measure like that. But the kick barely goes in. I would have tried to get the extra 2 yards, just make it as easy as possible. Like, I don't know. Like, do you have any problem with it?
Not really. The thing that came up to me on that potentially is that maybe they got the hash right and they just weren't. They didn't want to risk getting on the wrong hash. I actually thought they had an opportunity to throw the ball there. The way the time did set up, if they had used a play to pass and then run it, I honestly think I would have passed it more than run. But I guess
Well, yeah, but what happens if it's an incomplete there and there's 30 seconds left?
Well, so I was thinking you pass on 2nd down and then you run on
okay.
3rd down to wind it down. That's how I would have done it. But anyway, it's not the biggest deal in the end. I don't think ultimately 45 versus 52 is like the biggest difference for a modern kicker these days.
There's also the biggest issue on that play was the weird timeout fiasco where the ref, like Dan Campbell's trying to call his timeout and then the ref walks away from him and just calls it before Campbell called the timeout, and that they adjusted the clock because they're like, no, he meant to take it down to 4. I don't know, very weird.
Yeah, that was strange. Ref talk stuff on that note. They did miss a roughing the passer on Goff where he got hit up high. And the other one I wanted to talk about is that O'Connor sack I mentioned. Referees, it feels like, have gotten really bad at the quarterback throws the ball away while his knees are on the ground.
Yeah.
They have replay assist and they get it fixed really quickly, so it's not a big deal. But I just am a little dumbfounded at how bad they are at missing that call. Like you see it quite a bit in college football and the NFL. It doesn't seem like that hard, especially live. I mean, I was watching that live. I'm like, his knees are down. What what are we doing here?
I think refs have gotten, and this actually might be the Lions' fault from that Chiefs game back in 2019, where there's like 100-yard fumble return after Kerryon Johnson
Yeah.
fumbled in the goal line, because the refs are now trained to let the play go because they have replay assist and they can easily correct it if it's wrong, but you can't correct it if the guy is
Yep.
not actually down and you call it down. So it's just because of that. They've been trained to let things go and let the play out, knowing that they can fix it after the fact.
Yeah, that is fair. And then finally, we have to discuss, as we close the book on this game, have you ever seen, in your entire life watching football, an offensive lineman attempt to strip sack his own quarterback?
So that was probably the funniest sack we will see all season, where James Houston screams off the edge, forces CJ Stroud to step up and roll out. On the other edge, Josh Pascal comes running through, and they both get a hand on him. And then Titus Howard decided it's Titus Howard time and holds CJ Stroud in place so that the Lions defenders can tackle him, and then tries to take the hand off like he's about to run it. It was.
Except he's not taking a handoff; he's taking the ball from Stroud.
He thought, he's trying to make it a handoff, and
Yeah,
Stroud
and Stroud
understandably
isn't.
is not. Yeah.
He thought he was gonna take the ball and run with it.
I have no idea what on earth happened there. It was one of the funniest offensive line plays of all time.
Just crazy. You watch it live and you're like, wow, the ball came out. Oh, that's interesting. Then they fell on it. And then you watch that replay and you're like, what is he doing? What? That guy tried to rip it out? Like, just bizarre. One of the strangest plays I've ever seen. We should, because we kind of glossed over it in the defensive section, we should quickly note that James Houston showed signs of life in his namesake city for the first time in a long time. Had that nice little burn around the edge around Tunsil, and he did have the coverage sack earlier in the game. So he's earned himself at least another game, and hopefully he can keep building on that. Lastly, with this one, honestly, just a really impressive win, especially early on in the game. It felt like the Ravens game from last year, the where they just kind of get blitzed. I know people were talking about the Packers one on Thanksgiving from last year, but that one, it was like more back and forth. There was a lot of offense. There were a lot of like weird turnovers. This one early on just really felt like the Ravens game. It's just like, we don't have it. We're getting mauled. Our offense is doing nothing, turning it over. Defense is, okay. And then they just steered the ship back in the right direction, and it's another example of how many ways the Lions have to beat you. And their defense carried the day. Honestly, maybe the best defensive game of the Dan Campbell era, one of the best.
I was going to say,
the circumstances they were put in, it was great.
Yeah. I was going to say, is that Aaron Glenn's magnum opus as a defensive coordinator so far?
Probably.
Like, especially that second half. Like,
yeah, it was really good. Really impressive win. And it keeps them on top of the NFC, now up to 8-1, and you got a pretty favorable schedule moving forward. We talked last week about the 5-game stretch out of the bye. They end up going 5-0.
Yep, in the most normal way possible that everyone predicted. And now you have games against the Jaguars and Colts where you theoretically should be able to take care of business in those games, and if you do, you're looking at 10-1. Which
I would say 11-1, because the game after those is against a team that lost by 16 points to the New England Patriots. If we want to start talking about NFL scores, but,
we can start there. The Chicago Bears are dead. The start of season mirage is officially over. We had talked about the fact that the Bears had an easy schedule to start the year and were going into a gauntlet with the lone exception of the Patriots game. Lo and behold, the Patriots absolutely throttled them with 9 sacks on Caleb Williams in a prediction that is looking better by the week for me, saying that he was going to lead the league in sack yards lost. I'm pretty sure the Patriots had like 17 sacks or something on the season coming into this game. Like they have not been a good pass rush, and they put up 9 sacks. So, um, I'm so sad that Aiden Hutchinson will not get to play against them this year because he might have racked up 10 more sacks in those 2 games.
Yeah, it's I haven't watched a ton of the Bears. We'll get to see them in a few weeks on Thanksgiving. Uh, Probably will watch a decent bit of these. I guess they overlap with our games, but they play
Yeah.
Packers and Vikings next, so those are games at least to keep an eye on. Uh, they fire offensive coordinator Shane Waldron today. Feels like you have to. It just, I know that they don't have an offensive line. They can't block anybody, but it definitely does feel like some of the issues Williams has holding onto the ball are part of this, but obviously the fact they don't have a running back rushing for over 4 yards per carry is also an issue. They just don't. They have some skill position guys, but they just don't have the meat of what you need to be a good offense in this league.
At the end of the day, though, what the biggest problem that Justin Fields had in Chicago was he held onto the ball too long and he couldn't progress through his reads. And suddenly, it seems like Caleb Williams' biggest problems are holding onto the ball too long and not progressing through his reads in time. I might be going crazy, but I feel like it's the same cycle. Like you are actively ruining this quote unquote generational prospect that everyone talked about. Like he's been the third best rookie this, maybe the fourth, depending on how you feel about Drake May. There's you cannot convince me that Caleb Williams has been better than Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix this season. And
No,
Drake May just beat him.
yeah, I'm gonna give Williams time. I think this is a pretty just. It's an unserious franchise, and that's a
Yeah.
big part of this. I was reading, I think it was the Mike Sando piece in the Athletic yesterday, and talking about, oh, if they fire Eberflus, people don't think they would be inclined to hire a powerful, established coach because they have Kevin Warren, the engaged, active president, and I'm just like, I don't even know what to say to that. Like, if the
Like
team president is too powerful and doesn't want to be upstaged by a head coach, especially when the team president was the former Big Ten commissioner, just like a classic empty suit character. It's just like, what are we doing here?
they're gonna back up the Brinks truck for Ben Johnson, I think. Like the if you're Chicago, you should be getting rid of Matt Eberflus and you should be throwing as much money as you feasibly can at Ben Johnson because you need a more creative offensive plan because what you have put forth with this regime with 2 different quarterbacks that are very talented has not worked at all. So I don't know. They need a change.
And you need to spend capital in the offseason, particularly
Yep.
draft picks on offensive linemen. Like they just have to.
Their first, you could have all like your first 5 picks all be offensive linemen, and you could make your 3 biggest free agent signings offensive linemen. No one would blame them. Like you can completely overhaul that, and everyone would applaud you for it because you have the weapons. You have DJ Moore and Romo Dunze and Cole Kmet. That you're good with that. That can work. That's a solid enough like DJ Moore, a good wide receiver one. Romo Dunze, you hope develops. Keenan Allen might be there next year. We don't know. He's aging, so I don't really count him in that. Cole Kmet is a fine tight end. You have and DeAndre Swift is fine. He can be fine when you give him good offensive line play. So I don't know, man. Chicago is just very dead. Another NFC North the Packers were on bye, so the other NFC North team that was in action, the Minnesota Vikings, who yeah, that was a game as well where they are playing a Jags team without Trevor Lawrence and they barely survive a 12-7 win where Sam Darnold threw 3 interceptions of his own. He might have turned back into a pumpkin.
Yeah, I think there's a reason for legitimate concern now with Darnold after that game. Up to 10 interceptions on the season. He's still having a nice year overall. but it is definitely something to keep an eye on as the Vikings season goes along. There's not a lot to say about this game, honestly. Uh, the Vikings just clobbered the Jags in the box score. Yardage was something like 400 to 100 roughly. Uh, Truly miserable effort from Jacksonville, which I guess will be relevant in a few minutes when we preview the Jaguars. But otherwise, Vikings escape an ugly game with a win. Okay, I liked it the Jags could pull off an upset, but nothing in the box score indicated that they belonged in that game, so I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it.
Yep. Otherwise, around the NFL, the Cardinals destroyed the Jets, effectively killing any semblance of optimism the Jets had. Cardinals, every week we go on through this season, the Lions win over the Cardinals looks more and more impressive. Kyler Murray, there's a lot of people that owe Kyler Murray an apology for what they said over the last offseason because, that dude is still a very good quarterback. And I've been a Kyler Murray sympathizer for years at this point. Maybe he doesn't quite deserve the contract they gave him, but he is a lot better than a lot of other quarterbacks in the league. So
Yeah, so they're 6-4 now on the year, and as we talked about last week with regards to them making a trade, they've got a very advantageous schedule the rest of the way. 6-4. They have Patriots and Panthers remaining that can get you to 8, and then if you win 3 out of 5 against Seattle twice, Rams, Vikings, and Niners, then you're almost certainly in the playoffs. If you go 2-3 over that span, you still got a shot at 10-7. So they're going to probably be knocking on the door of the wild card / NFC West Division Championship picture for the rest of the way. And again, we didn't think much of it at the time, but they're having a nice season, and that Lions win looks pretty solid.
there's a better than 0% chance that if the Lions cannot secure the 1 seed, that their wild card opponent might be Arizona. So although the other team, well, the entire NFC West is just completely up for grabs right now. Every team is in the mix. The Rams obviously losing on Monday night in just a very just bad game to watch, honestly, against the Dolphins.
That was a bad
But
loss for them too. Like they
yeah,
needed that win to stay in this hunt.
and it's not like I would have understood it more if Tua just connected with Tyreek Hill for a bunch of long touchdowns, but no, it was a slog of a game, and the Rams only mustered field goals. Um, they're 4-5 now. Is that what they are?
4-5, yeah, tie with Seattle.
You just need to start getting some more wins because you got behind the sticks early. You got behind the 8 ball with all the injuries, which is understandable, but the season's slipping away. So you got to start righting the ship a little bit. As for another NFC West team that's riding the ship, 49ers, they outlast the Buccaneers in Christian McCaffrey's return to the lineup. McCaffrey was not good on the ground, but very good as a receiver. The Buccaneers they're 4-6, and that does not feel right because they are a better team than being 4-6. They went toe to toe with the Chiefs. They went toe to toe with the Niners. They did beat the Lions. Like this is a very capable football team.
They're 4-6 with a plus 13 point differential. Meanwhile, the Falcons are 6-4 with a plus 2 point differential. So, curse of the close games for the Buccaneers this season. They've lost games by 3, 6, 5, 10, 6, and then one stinker against Denver by 19. But a lot of close losses for the Bucs. Bummer for them because they're probably not going to make the playoffs as a result. But they're a much better team than their record indicates. I guess the plus side of it is you get a higher draft pick you don't really deserve, and you get an easier schedule next year. So
They
bounce back in the future.
They are victims of the first place schedule for sure. But to be fair, this is their upcoming schedule: Giants, Panthers, Raiders, Chargers, Cowboys, Panthers, Saints.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the Chargers is your hardest game remaining. I think they actually might be all right. You got 2 games against the Panthers that should be easy. You got a Giants team that is just dead. You got a Cowboys team that is just dead, especially with the news that Dak Prescott is out for the year. We'll see. I mean, losing those 2 games to the Falcons stings for them, though. Like, that sucks.
Yeah, because that's the thing is you look at this schedule and you say, okay, they could go 6-1 in that last 7. They get to 10-7, but as a result, with the Falcons holding the tiebreak, Falcons only need to get to 10-7 to win the division, and they have Raiders and Giants and Panthers themselves, so then they'd really only need one win against Denver, Chargers, Vikings, Commanders. They probably do it. So it's tough, but hey, the Bucks still have matters in their own hands. They can put themselves in the wild card picture. I think that seventh wild card spot is probably going to be a 10-7 team, unless it's an 11-6. But we'll see. They can make it interesting at least.
Yeah, and the last note I had before we get onto the Jags preview, the Chiefs can't keep getting away with this. The Denver Broncos, they take the Chiefs to the brink. They line up, I think it was a 34-yard field goal. Very makeable kick. And Leo Chanel just completely bulldozes through the offensive line and blocks the kick. The Chiefs win again. They're still undefeated. I have no explanation other than voodoo magic and Taylor Swift casting a spell on Arrowhead Field. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
it is the encapsulation of the keep getting away with it meme. I mean, I don't know what to say at this point, but also it's not our problem. They're in the AFC. If we are concerned with the Chiefs, we will be in the Super Bowl, and that's fine with me. So I don't know, man. They are. Anytime you're 9-0, you're a good team. You're an impressive team. You have to be to get to that record. But I think they are 7-0 in one-score games, which feels fairly fluky. That said, at the end of the day, if the Ravens want to make the Super Bowl, if the Bills want to make the Super Bowl, you're going to have to beat the Chiefs at some point. You're just going to have to beat them in January. Someone is going to do it. The Bengals did it years ago. Someone's got to do it. And whether you're the 1 seed or they're the 1 seed, last year Ravens had it at home and it didn't matter. So.
Yep, we'll see if anyone is up to the challenge. I don't know. We need a new generation Eli Manning to take down this undefeated juggernaut of a team. Although I wouldn't like. Obviously, the Chiefs they are the top team in the NFL until someone beats them in January or February. But yeah, the wins that they've had certainly do not make them seem unbeatable. Like, they are a beatable team. So. We'll see.
I think the one good thing about their season, honestly, is it's further evidence to induct Steve Spagnuolo into the Coordinator Hall of Fame that doesn't exist but should, because, man, their defense has really carried the day for them, and it flew under the radar for a number of years there. It started to get more recognition last year, but it is just an excellent unit, and he deserves a lot of credit. He's coordinated several of the great defenses of the 21st century, so credit to him. He's as big a part of that team as Andy Reid or anybody else from a coaching standpoint.
Yep, and I hope that we do not have to see him, but if we do, then it's then we have done pretty good ourselves if we are concerned with the Spags defense. Now moving on, final segment. Jaguars coming to Ford Field as the Lions return home after having 4 of 5 on the road. I don't know if Trevor Lawrence is going to play in this game. We will have to, again, watch the injury reports all week. I don't know. What are your feelings on the Jags? Lions are currently minus 13-point favorites.
Well, one thought on the Jags is that there's a possibility that we could be the team to fire Doug Peterson. Like, you can never. I love that when you get to be the team that delivers the knockout blow to a head coach, but this era of Jaguars football just feels over. Like, they'll still have Trevor Lawrence, but they're going to have to pivot. New coaches, new leadership. Something has got to change. 2-8 on the season, and you look at that defense. That's the biggest thing that stands out to me. They're allowing 390 yards against per game, 26.4 points per game against. We've seen some teams just light these guys up. Green Bay scored 30 on them. Eagles scored 28. Bears scored 35. Colts scored 34. Bills scored 47. This feels like a good week to have Jared Goff and Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown on your fantasy team. Like, this is regardless of whether Lawrence plays, because I think that's the big thing here is like if Lawrence plays, then we could get a somewhat high scoring game that the Lions should still win. If Lawrence doesn't play, this could be the widest spread in any NFL game this season.
Yeah, like the list of Jaguars that are going to be on this roster long term: Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas, Josh Hines Allen, Trayvon Walker, maybe Tyson Campbell. Five
Maybe.
guys. Five guys. Maybe five guys. Four for sure, and maybe five. Not good. Not good. So we'll see. This is going to be a game where the Lions theoretically should be able to do pretty much whatever they want offensively, which bodes well. You expect a heavy dose of the run game where the Lions are content to just take their 200 rush yards and run out the clock. But I would like Trevor Lawrence to play and for Brian Thomas to challenge the secondary downfield because, I always like the secondary to be tested in as many ways as possible, knowing that the Lions are probably going to have to beat probably the Niners at some point, who have a very diverse passing attack, obviously, that the Lions failed to contain last year. So I just want to get ready for that.
Yeah, and I mean, if Lawrence plays, the Jacksonville offense is certainly a capable offense. They score 20 points per game on average, which isn't like lighting it up, but they can hang in games with teams when they have him healthy. We saw them play pretty well against the Packers a few weeks back, and they were able to hang in that game. If Lawrence isn't playing, it just doesn't feel like there's any path at all. Mac Jones was brutal in that game against the Vikings. The whole team was brutal. Like that box score is just ugly. Jones was 14 of 22 for 111 yards, 5 yards an attempt, 0 touchdowns, 2 picks. And they rushed for 3.1 yards per carry as a team. Not good. They 3.3 yards per play on 43 plays. Like it just, and the thing was they had no possession in that game. Time of possession was 42 minutes for Vikings to 18 minutes for the Jags. Every time red zone flipped over to that game, the Vikings had the ball. Like I literally never saw the Jacksonville run a play after their early touchdown. So based on that box score and what we know about Mac Jones, if he doesn't play, this feels like another just total blowout.
Yeah, we could be in Titans territory again in this one. Yeah, so I was just reading up on the Lawrence injury. It seems like it might require surgery, but the Jaguars do have their bye in week 12, so would make sense for them to hold Lawrence out of this game, go through the bye, and then he can return in week 13. Again,
I mean,
we'll
what's
see.
the point? Like,
Yeah,
just
sure.
honestly speaking,
Get surgery, honestly.
Yeah, if surgery is the optimal outcome, you're 2-8. You're not making the playoffs. You have an advantage to tank and get some core pieces that could help steer this thing back in a positive direction. Like, I don't know, man, throw in the towel. Like, there's no reason to be rushing Lawrence back.
You're competing with the Giants for the number 1 overall pick. And even if you don't get it, the Giants are going to take a quarterback, so.
Hey, they got a number 1 pick a few years ago, and they didn't use it very well. So maybe that's not the solace we think it is. I don't know.
Now that you said that, Trayvon Walker's going to have 5 sacks in this game.
The Jaguars have had like a couple seasons in my lifetime where it was like, okay, they might be interesting, and then immediately all hope is just sucked out of the franchise. Like they have that 1 year with Bortles and Fournette and that really good defense with Jalen Ramsey, and it was like, wow, their defense is so good they made the AFC Championship game. This could be interesting if they could upgrade at QB, and then just boom, within a couple seasons, it's just completely fallen apart and they're rebuilding. Then they get rid of Urban Meyer, they bring in Peterson, they win a playoff game. It's like, okay, they got Trevor Lawrence. This looks like the team that can win the AFC South, and now we're right back to this just disaster zone.
We had that, it was a few years ago, the last time these two teams played, where they both entered 4-7, and the outlook on them was these are two of the better young up-and-coming teams in the NFL, and the Lions wiped the floor with them. The Jaguars, they're a fine team. They were a fine team. I don't know. I will forever be mad that we got robbed of a Blake Bortles versus Nick Foles Super Bowl. Like we could have killed the QB wins conversation in one Super Bowl, but alas. Oh well. But yeah, Jaguars not very good. If the Lions manage to blow this game, it will be a spectacular failure on all fronts. So I don't know. Like,
Yeah. The other thing we should point out in this game, besides opportunities to maybe see Hendon Hooker play, is Zadarius Smith, who didn't
yeah.
play against Houston. He'll probably play in this one, so that's interesting at least.
Yeah, it's going to be when him and Pascal are on the field at the same time on pass rushing downs. It's going to be very interesting because it's essentially going to be Smith, Pascal, DJ Reader slash Levi Onwuzurike, and Ali McNeil, and all of them primarily just collapse the pocket. They don't like McNeil and Onwuzurike occasionally will beat a guy clean with speed, but it's going to be a lot of the pockets constricting rather than someone flying off. Like James Houston might have a few reps where he flies off the edge and gets pressure, but in general, it's going to be very interesting to see how the Lions get push up front from their defensive line and. I don't know. Hopefully, the run defense stays strong because that would be a good sign. Just as we kind of get into this, the post lull where they had no edge rushers to defend the run.
Yeah, obviously you want to see that momentum carry forward after such a dominant run defense game. So
Yeah,
there's nothing. It's not a situation where there's nothing that can be learned. This is the NFL. Teams are still decent, so there are things to watch. But on paper, this is the easiest game the rest of the way, and you're at home, so take care of business easily, and no stress this week. That would be appreciated.
yeah. Let's see Hendon Hooker. That'd be the ideal outcome, I think. So that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. If you made it this far, be sure to follow the show on any podcasting platform, subscribe on YouTube, and leave a like on the video. You can find me on Twitter at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain, and you can find the show at Payne and Drain as well. So make sure you go follow the socials, keep up with the show, and thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys next week. Cheers, guys.